Okay, so welcome everyone, and welcome Jeff, and welcome Namali.
Hello.
Good to be here. Hey, everybody.
Good to see you both. So today we'll be engaging in an integral review of 2023 in a conversation format. And Jeff, we'd like to start by asking you a series of rapid fire questions. So that means that we ask you questions in quick succession. Namali and I switching roles. And then you have about, let's say, a maximum of 30 seconds to answer. So
that sounds like fun.
Indeed. So the first question we want to fire at you is, which three most intriguing news headlines grabbed your attention from an integral perspective in 2023?
Well, probably something along the lines of the world economy grew, that there is a epidemic of anxiety and depression. And I don't know, the Israel-Gaza, the war and peace, I suppose, and those are categories more than headlines. But if we look at the world, it's evolving in many ways, but these three catch my attention, just if I have to have top three.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, those are intriguing, and perhaps we can return to them later. Next question is, what was the most joyful event for you this year in 2023? What provided you, or what gave you the most joy this year?
Oh, all right. Just because a lot of people who are listening will understand what I'm talking about, my continued development. I feel like I feel like, another year, appreciation of life and of the heartbreak, of the beauty, of my passing vulnerability and, momentary existence in the larger scheme of things. And really where it's manifested is in, I was going to say being a better housefrau, because that's what I've been thinking of myself. But yeah, it's like family and friends and doing stuff and, paying attention, but also appreciating my life. I don't know what the next one's going to be like. And there's, sort of a whole moral cascade that happens from realizing one's position, one's privilege, the role of everybody, how the bodhisattva vow, in short, how happy can you be in a world of suffering, So, but that's the joy of the moment would be the short answer.
So the next question is, what concern?
First person. I did first person for so many decades. Third person, we can't. How do you escape third person? But second person's it's a good focus for five.
So Jeff, the next question is, what concerned you the most in 2023?
Well, what concerned me the most in 2023? Probably it would be more along the war and peace issue, the Ukraine, Israel, and that ever present, though diminishing, red strata that, it's funny to see it, because it's one of the reasons it's interesting is that Ukraine and Israel are both, at least Israel is, they're aspirationally at least modernist, but they have this red streak, and they, and the same, and then the Palestinians or Russians or their own kind of strange case developmentally. All of it gets me kind of stirred up. And we can talk more about that, but that would be my 30-second answer.
Okay, and then my next question to you is, what are 2 or 3 other podcasts that you find yourself listening to or watching? And if it's not a podcast, maybe it's a YouTube channel that you enjoy, or what's something in that way that outside of the daily vault you navigate to?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it points to something I think that is a 2023 continued a meteoric rise of, and that is just this mediaverse where I don't know, paleontology. I go to these, and there's these wonderful things now where these creators who are smart and know animation and history, and they will create these documentaries on YouTube, and then you can pay them with this little button at the bottom, and it's a career. And I love that. I just love it as an emergent. So I watch that kind of stuff. I watched Lex Friedman's one I find myself going back to. Well, I just listened to My Name is Barbara, which was 43 hours of audio. So that was a bit of my Mediaverse this time. But yeah, I like all of that. I'm also into cars. It's just a hobby of mine. So I like watching YouTubes on particularly car technology, like new models that people are making and reviews of them and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. The car thing is probably maybe a little bit new to us. I did not know that
Oh, really?
the Salzman was into cars. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm into cars as, sort of evolutionary in a way. I like the new models. I've been watching these Cybertruck reviews of the new Cybertruck that Tesla is putting out. And just the sort of half horrified marvel of Elon Musk and what's going on with him. I'm actually listening to his bio by Walter Isaacson, and that's very interesting because I've done podcasts on him. I've argued that he's a spiral wizard and and a genius in many ways. But one of his superpowers is the ability to, I don't know if it's the ability, but the inability to stop his red. And even despite himself, even despite his best intentions, his ability to create chaos and need to create chaos. Turns out evolution likes that. I mean, maybe that's another whole discussion too, but
No worries, no worries. Jeff, I think one of the things I recently discovered was a podcast called Warographics, or at least the channel's called Warographics, and they produce quite high quality content about all of the conflicts around the globe, and in a way that is historically informed and both sidists. So
yeah, I love it. War in graphics.
Warographics as one word. Warographics. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And they put out at least weekly a sort of a situation room, what they call it, and they sort of go through all of the current conflicts or potential conflicts. So and they go in depth quite a bit. So the next 30-second question is: what surprised you the most in 2023?
I guess I'd have to say the Hamas invasion in terms of the politics, but also if I think that Twitter was bought by Elon Musk at the end of October of last year, so he's basically run it for a year. The degree to which it's contributed to the evolution of the culture in ways good and bad are pretty impressive, and I think surprising. I mean, I didn't expect that.
Right. This one you only have, I think, 5 seconds to answer this next question. So make your prediction. Who do you think will win the 2024 US election?
Gavin Newsom.
Wishful thinking.
That's who came up, and we've been surprised before. And, of course, one of the things I've learned is predictions they're fun, and sometimes you win. It's like Vegas, but who knows? So in terms of a fun thought experiment, I think something like that would be not surprising. Or maybe Nikki Haley. I see that she's, gained in New Hampshire on Trump by, double digits in the last week. And that's fun, that it's fun how the sort of the morphology of like a flock of crows, just how the consciousness can shift. And even Republicans have to say, do we really want to do this again?
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. All right, very good. Yeah. Well, I
Okay.
secretly hope it's Gavin Newsom as well.
Cool.
So next question is, what do you look forward to the most in 2024?
Oh man, just the continued evolution of things. So what does that even mean? Specifically, one of the things that's really impressive to me is just that the virtual world is really just pretty baked in now. It's a real world. People are spending real time there. People are having real conversations there and, real relationships there. And it's just going to continue. And with AI and, the new thing that's caught my attention is the virtual girlfriend. It's a new app that is causing all kinds of consternation on Twitter and the media because it's this buxom babe who is, I think you could adjust all sorts of things about her, but she will have this sexy conversation with you. And then she'll get all pouty. And then she'll do this. And it's all these things that are just, it's like crack to a 14-year-old, or 15-year-old, or the 15-year-old in all of us kind of thing. And I'm sure there's the gay version. So I'm horrified, of course, and everybody's horrified. And now, these kids are going to sink ever deeper. Forget, there's porn, but now there's also, a relationship that might pass the Turing test for a 15, 16-year-old, arrested development kind of thing. So there's all these arguments. So as an integralist, when I'm horrified by something, I notice it. And I at least want to argue for the other side. I at least want to say, so what's good about the virtual girlfriend? Because the virtual girlfriend is probably coming. I don't see if there's going to be any elimination of this and more, as we move into smell-o-vision or whatever the fuck we're going to do with technology, with holograms. And so this is the beginning of that. And, maybe there is actual virtual space where people can sort of, I don't know, play, certainly, have conversations. It's like when we read a book, we get the download of a brilliant mind, and we don't think it's real, but it's really very uplifting and, it's very informative and all of that. Imagine if it's just, somebody, even some sort of a bot that when you have a problem, you tell them and they just give you the best advice that's out there. Or here's what Marcus Aurelius said. Here's what Walt Whitman said. Here's what this one said. Maybe there is a role for this. And also, it's not like 14-year-old boys have any social skills anyway. So, at least it's some practice, you know.
Yeah,
So,
that is scary.
anyway,
There's a lot
yeah.
that is almost scary. And that maybe perhaps leads us well into the next question, which is in 2024, if there's anything that with intention you could avoid, what would that be, Jeff? Like, is there anything that you actually feel is something you really want to practice avoiding?
Well, I want to avoid marinating in the crises of the world, honestly,
Mm.
because that's where I normally go. And I think so many people do. It's part of it when you talk about the depression of, modernity and post-modernity, really. It's just like you're aware of so much. You're aware of everything. I think I was telling you, Namali, that our mutual friend sent me this text about how sad she was about what happened in Johannesburg. And I thought, the nuclear meltdown, it was a fire in a building in downtown Johannesburg. And it was horrible for the, people who were involved. But she was depressed by this, in Denver. And so, I'm ever more, I don't know if I'm avoiding it, but I'm ever more conscious of how I titrate it and just how I relate to it and interface with it. It was this cryptic text. I'm so sad about the people in Johannesburg. So I'm thinking to myself, what happened to Johannesburg? So I looked it up on the internet. There had been so I don't mean to diminish that. That's the
Right.
thing, is that that's the realization. And we have this double whammy in postmodernity, where the realization of the horror of life on Earth, this dukkha, this just minimally it's unsatisfactory, maximally it's torture, this planet, and yet we've lost any hope of God and a redemption, and religion's gone. Rationalism has just created this materialist wasteland. And so you're left with no solution. In fact, the idea of a solution is even obscene. There's something, this is the postmodern dilemma. And more people are, sort of moving into it. It's a stage of development. It's appropriate because you got to get rid of these, this hangover, But then I think this is something I notice, that there's people coming out the other side. That there's people who are just refusing. You're not refusing. Yeah, they're refusing. I mean, you get sick of the soup you've been swimming in, and they're sick of it, and they want to find a positive life, and so there's this back to the nature, and there's people who are organized. It's fun to see people organizing on Twitter. It's Namali. I mean, you announced to the world that you're putting together a local group of integralists. That's great. Something that's non-virtual. And I didn't know that. That's great. So there's people doing things that are swimming against this current of hopelessness. And yet hopelessness is a stage of development,
Just to add to what you were saying before we go into the next question, from my perspective, if I'm suffering and I would know that people across the world would feel my suffering and then to such an extent suffer themselves that it would negatively influence their well-being, I wouldn't want that. So that's always also I reflect that back to myself in the sense that I'm not doing anyone any favors by debilitating myself through too much suffering in regard to the suffering of others.
Oh, love that. Yeah. Yeah, Namali, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just taking it all in. It's true. Yeah, this is especially interesting as an Enneagram 4, like who actually likes the tragedy sometimes. So it's a good reminder for me.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So what's liking the tragedy? Explain that so I can
I
have
think
some too. I'll have
yeah.
he's having.
Well, I think, and we might actually return to this in a bit also. Let's actually hold off on that because we have a question for you to later come to that is verging on this sort of the tragedy and the optimism issue from an
Okay,
integral
good.
perspective. Yeah.
Before we do, can I just respond to something I thought of when Lee was talking? Because, and then we can go to that. Because Lee, I think you make a really important distinction that it's like if I'm suffering and I'm laying on my deathbed, I actually want somebody to pay attention to me, but I don't want them to suffer. So I want to be seen. So we want them. So if I'm suffering, I do take great comfort in knowing that people are aware of it, and I don't want them to suffer too. So there's an important distinction there, right? Isn't that cool? Yeah.
So the next question, and you actually led us into this somewhat, Jeff, is that what's your 30-second take at the moment, at this point in your life, on the value of using integral theory?
I think it's pretty indispensable to me. It's just, first of all, it's a name for the way I think. So and would I think this way if I didn't know integral theory? No, I don't think so. I think maps really help you to enter and work in territories that you wouldn't otherwise. But it'd be interesting to know what would happen who I'd be if I hadn't ran across Ken Wilber in integral theory. But I did. First of all, I don't have to have hardened ideas like I used to about the world, because I do realize it's a moving thing. And even that's sort of new to me, the last few years. I just naturally take multiple perspectives. I'm interested in them. But part of it is, it plays to my fiveness and my, just wanting to know this, that, and, so I can put it all together. And, sometimes I get suspicious that I put it together using this map because this is the map I know. And I think that's true. But it's still better than any other map I've ever run across. It just is. So I'm making a stand for that for me. So integral theory is very much alive for me. And more, it's almost like for me meditation. I did all the years of meditation and meditation retreats and discipline and all of that. Now I don't do much of that at all, except that I do feel like I have the fruits of it.
Well, so my next question is going to stump you with that answer you just gave, which is, what is the greatest drawback of using integral theory?
Wow. Well, using it unskillfully is a drawback, but because you see people as what is it? Cosmic addresses instead of people. So you really do want to see through any map to the eyes of the person you're beholding and the karma they bring and the heartbreak they bring. And, it's not easy being human and letting that in, so you want to, and no maps will get in the way of that. So, integral can do that. And also, I think there's a way, and maybe this is a more honest, practical answer. I think it helps me, it keeps things a little slippery for me. I can just say, well, that's that. Those are pre-modern people. Pre-modern people are going to pre-modern.
Mm-hmm.
And it ain't pretty. And so I can slide off of it and not do what I just, argued to, at least pay attention, see it. So I think that integral can be a means of doing that, and is for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in 2024, Jeff, if you had to live on a desert island, which 3 books would you want to take?
I would take, well, in terms of books that have changed my life, I don't know which ones I would want to have handy. Which ones would I want to have handy? I always thought that Shanti Deva's book, I forget the name of it, but when I was reading it in my Buddhist studies, I thought, this book I need to take to a desert island if I ever have to take one. So it reminds me I need to look up the Shanti Deva book. I probably have it in my bookcase there from Naropa days in Namali.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I love, I'd be tempted to say the Bible simply because it has so influenced humanity. I have a lot of allergies to it because I'm a, Reformed Christian who went through atheism, let's say. And Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, absolutely would take that. Number 1, Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. And maybe if I thought about it, it'd be a couple other poetry books, like Wisława Szymborska is a favorite of mine. And there's something about that is just timeless. You're entering, through words, you're entering the numinous, you're entering the beyond time and space thing. That's what art does, and that's what poetry does. To hear it.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. In 2024, if Jeff Salzman, if you had no fear, what would you do?
Wow. Well, I mean, I'm tempted to say I would just turn the camera on and just say what I have to say, and every day, whether or not I had something to say. It'd be kind of like that exercise in writing where you just keep writing until you actually stumble upon something. And you do. There's something about getting in the groove, and that happens for me. So if I had courage and more ambition, I guess what I do, like the right answer for anybody is going to be to give my gift. If I had more courage, I'd give my gift better, and that would be the way I could imagine doing that.
Mm-hmm.
30 seconds,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, so there's a great answer as well, Jeff. And so the last question in the rapid fire round is, if you could interview anyone, living or dead, who would you interview and why?
Oh my. Um, dare I say Barbara Streisand? Uh, well,
Is that the
I,
Barbara? My name is Barbara that you refer to?
yeah, I'm a fan of early Barbara. I'm a fan of Barbara from 1960s and 70s, and then I sort of lost it. Oh, I was just going to say the one that I would interview would be, I would say like Elon Musk or something, but Walter Isaacson has done it. I don't really have any much more to ask. So anyway, I can't. We're going to pass on that one for now.
If it comes to you later, then just share it with us. And Barbara
Mhm.
Streisand's a good answer, but as well.
There we go. That's a good answer. Because I would ask her, how does it feel to be you? And she answers that in the book over and over again. She said, nothing special. That's her thing. And it's like, I think that's the right answer. She says, I forget, I'm in an elevator and somebody's staring at me and I think, oh yeah, I'm this Barbara Streisand thing, but otherwise she's walking around like everybody else.
Yeah.
She has this genius. She's a perfect example of the difference between excellence and genius. There's excellence that everybody recognizes, and it's a wonderful thing, and it makes the world go round. Then every so often, there's a genius that just spikes into a new territory. So she could do that by having this insight that she could act songs, but they had to be great songs. They had to have actually a message, and she had instincts for that as a teenager. And then she had the Stradivarius of a voice that transmitted that. And she acted these songs, and it became the thing that nobody could resist. She went from this achievement to Time Magazine at age 20 to, her career. That wasn't the thing she valued. The thing she valued was she wanted to be an actress. And I give her credit that she's an excellent actress. In the right role, she's a great actress. But she's not an actress like a Meryl Streep is an actress. To me, her roles she chose were, she went into another direction you can't argue with because she became even bigger and more popular. But she lost me because she wasn't paying as much attention to this, other thing that I was loving. And, so anyway, that's the short story of Barbara. And let me just say that there's a very important epilogue, and that is that in reading her or listening to her book, when she's reading it herself, which is a scream, she's so good. I really have come to appreciate this other parts of her career and her passion for being a director and being an actress, where to me, she didn't have quite the gift. So there we go.
All right.
A critique.
Yeah. Well, very good. So that was actually the end of our what we thought would be like a rapid fire round of 30-second answers. I think we took a lot more time than that, which is totally fine. And so
yeah,
we'll move
45
on we'll move on to the next round of questions, and you're free to answer them in any way that you want, 30 seconds or more. So my next question is bringing you into to just share your thoughts a little bit about, Integral. It's you and I have known each other now 20 years through this thing that brought us together. Certainly, we've worked at Integral Institute, we did the Boulder Integral Center together, and what adventures we've had, right? And so we've seen this movement doing all kinds of things, growing, shrinking, I don't know, whatever whatever that has happened. So I'm curious for you, what are the kinds of specific topics or trends that you see to be emerging within this integral movement, integral domain, the Lu-Shi place of integral? What do you see as sort of how have you seen it evolving or devolving, or, it doesn't matter however you see it. What do you see for the integral world, and what do you want to see?
Um, yeah, such a good question. And, I'd really love to hear what you have to say about it too. But I'll start. Uh, the, you know, I think that there was an there's stages and sort of almost ripples of the integral world in this larger stream of integral coming online into human consciousness, but by whatever name. Okay, so that just being postmodern, multi-perspectival, um, you know, holarchical, that kind of thinking is coming online inevitably, and I see it happening all over the place. Um, so there's that. And that's what really is the most interesting to me. And part of it is, I think, my personality is that, I sort of rose to the occasion of being, you and I, a part of an integral community, the center of an integral community here in Boulder for many years. And we had our church and we did our seminars and we worked with Ken in the early days of the Integral Institute. I think that seeded, seeded, a lot of what we see as integral flourishing in the world. And, people who are sort of integrally informed, but didn't quite drink the Kool-Aid like we did. But I like the Kool-Aid. I'm pro Kool-Aid. The Aqua model and integral theory, I've learned it from numerous sources, but mainly Ken, is I still think is the best thing out there. So, um, and then you see the integral adjacent, and I think you know more about this than I do, Namali, because I think you pay more attention to it. But there's I always loved Peter Limberg, to whatever degree I, paid attention. And, there's what you're doing, Lee, and there's people who are doing different flavors of integral. And I think that's probably appropriate. And at the same time, it's almost like what integral is in and of itself is that there's sort of new emergence and new ways that it's coming online. And then there's also an awareness that we actually want to go back to some of this face-to-face stuff, which is why I was so impressed with what you're talking about, Namali, and putting together a little meetup, simple as that, where it's real flesh and blood. And I hope that happens. I think that's happening. COVID always threw a wrench in that, but COVID also brought forth the virtual world in ways that would have probably taken a decade. So, welcome to Integral, where you see, well, this was the bad part and this was the good part. What else can I say? So where was I?
Yeah. Do you have any sort of new, somewhat staying within the same question, and then I'll pass it on to you, Lee, for another question. I'm curious if there are any teachers or certain people that interest you more and you pay attention to them more because of some kind of a new integral, new emergent idea that you get from them.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, I hate to say no. I mean, but I talk to people. I mean, that's what I have something that I would have thought would have been an impossible paradise when I first started reading Ken Wilber by myself alone and nobody understood what I was talking about. I have people like you, like this moment, you and Lee. I have Steve McIntosh next door. So I have people I talk to, and that's really so nourishing. Diane, these are my dear friends in the integral world. And so that I do, but do I read that? No, what I do read is I read people on Twitter. Twitter becomes sort of my center for finding the information that I want. That's not the only thing, but it's the center in that, welcome to the multiple perspectives. Jesus Lord. And then you can see how they organize themselves into different arenas and so forth. And I see de facto integral. So I follow people who are challenging the generally postmodern, but also just modern, just this modernity. We're going to look back on modernity and say, yeah, it brought forth spectacular, tangible results. But boy, did we pay for it in terms of spiritual and, sort of the stuff that is pre-modern, why people don't want to enter modernity. why 50+% of the people on the planet haven't.
Mhm.
So where was
Yeah,
I?
for those of us who have been in this integral world for a while, but also lots of new, I find new people joining these ILP sessions and stuff all the time as well, who haven't been in this for so long. Is there a message that you would give to the integral world in general?
Yeah,
As
keep it
somewhat of an
integral. I mean,
elder,
actually,
as
yeah,
somewhat
no,
of
yeah,
an
keep it
elder.
integral. Operationalize it. Work with it in your life. You do integral practice, which is basically perspective taking. And
Mhm.
that's either an appealing thing or it isn't. But when it is, nurture it. That's sort of one of the markers, or maybe the marker. Um, and I'm thrilled to hear that anytime that integral, self-identified integral people can uh, uh, get with each other, and God, the virtual world is such an opportunity, then I'm all for it. And I
Mhm.
join in a lot. I do my shows and drop in on this and that. It's wonderful. And you're, Namali, one of the real centers of the spokes. And I just want to appreciate you. And you definitely have helped keep me in the game to the degree that I am. It's, so I have a personal appreciation.
Well, thank you. Thanks, sweet.
Yeah, and on behalf of the integral movement, which still is alive and has a lot of juice to it. So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah,
Some more good news in that regard is that I've also been speaking with Corey about doing some community conversations with the integral life community, and just to see whether we can create more local holons across the world. So this summer I also organized something in Amsterdam, and we had some people coming over from the UK and from Norway. So things are happening, and it's very nice to get to meet people in the flesh, as you said. And
yeah.
and
Okay.
there's also somebody who wants to perhaps try to create an integral organization, because of course integral life is a business, and there's not really an integral organization which can
Yeah.
connect, for instance, with academic institutions, etc. So I'm curious to see whether that might have some legs, and whether there might be a consolidation of the integral project in a particular direction.
Yeah, me too. If you think of just a karmic historic force for some of the things that we've mapped out and talk about, multi-perspectivalism and whole argument, that's got to find lots of different ways of cohering into the culture, you know. And one of them, has to be person to person, and face to face. And we did it in Amali, we had we often had 30, 40, 100 people in those rooms doing our 5-day seminars. And that was precious times. I feel like that has been very significant. I'm going to take, I don't care about taking credit for it, but I'm just going to notice that has to have been a very significant development of when we look back at the history of integral theory, and I think we will.
Mhm.
So I think people should start carving our face into statues.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
hilarious. And just to also super quickly mention the in-person gathering that you brought up a little while ago, Jeff, that I've organized for anyone who might be listening to this. If you live in the Boulder, Denver general area, we meet at the Boulder Public Library from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. every first and third Sundays. So I'll just make a little note of that. So if someone wants to join us, please do.
Yeah, that's a good point, Namali.
Cool.
And I've also had some people respond to the videos that we've been putting out so far and asking whether there are integral gatherings locally where they live. So if you're watching this and you're also interested in getting together with some integrally informed people wherever you are, then send us an email at info@practicalintegral.com, and then we know of some people across the globe organizing local holons. It's not everywhere, but but if we know of somewhere and that's appropriate to you, then we can share that. So, so the whole integral brings us now into the next question, and that is, at the beginning of the rapid fire round, we asked you about 3 most intriguing news stories that you'd experienced during 2023 from an integral perspective, and now we want to come back to that in greater depth. So you spoke already about, of course, the Israel-Hamas conflict. You spoke about Russia-Ukraine. Perhaps can you sort of pinpoint and go into some depth around the 3, for you, most significant stories in the news from 2023 from an integral perspective?
And perhaps we should have noted this down, because I remember the one other was the economy. You mentioned something about the economy. Then you mentioned the sort of the war story in general, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, or Israel, Hamas. The third point, I'm actually forgetting right now. I don't know if either one of you remember.
I think it was teenage depression.
Ah, yes,
or well,
got it.
something like that. Yeah. So if we're just using integral theory, right? So the world continues to evolve. Any given year, who knows what's going to happen? But yet we can see these larger trends. And one of the things that I'm sort of ready to lock in some sort of understanding that modernity has made an amazing, it has a stable, reliable way of creating wealth. So, it's not everywhere, but that it's like, this is the first paragraph. I went to The Economist, and this is The Economist magazine, and this is the world of the modern, postmodern, intelligentsia business world. And this is their news lead story. Almost everyone expected a global recession in 2023 as central bankers fought high inflation. They were wrong. Global GDP has probably grown by 3%, which is pretty remarkable. Job markets have held up. Inflation is way down. Stock market's up 20%. And then, in the US at least, major gains have happened at the lower levels of the working. So it's like the rich are getting richer, but the poor are getting richer faster. And then they talked about the growth of the economies in each country. And the number 1 economy was Greece. Greece, who had the, whatever meltdown that it had. And it just another in a long line of secession of, like, Iceland melted down. Now it's one of the top economies. Ireland melted down. Now so once a country gets engaged in this modern system, I think it's pretty amazing that we just keep sailing along. Will some, economic asteroid hit? I don't know. I think there might be something we could take some reliable faith in. Modernity, it's not like it's a new thing. It's mature. Economists, and then not to mention what we're going to know from AI in terms of, just finding patterns, because that's what it is. Finding, what happens when we do this. And then you can never quite factor in animal spirits, but you can at least know that you don't know what the animal spirits are. And that's something the economists didn't used to know. They didn't know what they didn't know. So anyway, I just think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, certainly. I recently heard someone speak about how the economy is basically structured around infinite growth, in the sense that money needs to keep coming in, because the current system is based on loans which are given out, and there's not enough money in the economy to cover all of the loans, basically. So the only way forward is to keep generating, to give out more loans, etc. I'm not completely clear on the specifics, but it does seem to be the case that the economy as a system will need to be overhauled in a structural way at some point in the future. But to what, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, noticing that we have reached a level of reliable creation of wealth is by no means saying this is the optimum system, probably the optimum system for now, or at least one of them. I mean, it's a way of noticing what is going on in terms of where we are in terms of our development. But it's very much a modern system, and that's why I talk about sort of this perfection of modernity that's happening. But it's not a postmodern system. A postmodern system is egalitarian. environmentally conscious. I mean, right there, there's two strikes against modernity, you know. Um, in the sense that modernity created wealthy people, before unless you were the king or queen, we had equality and poverty. That was, the kind of equality we had pre-modern. But yeah, no, there's a move in the culture and continues to be. This is something I think we could notice even with the what's happening with the youth, is that there is support for capitalism is very much that's would be, it's almost obscene or certainly passé, and just sort of a natural egalitarianism that I think will be what we do install over time. I think it's happening, and there'll probably be some, I don't know what the integration will be of this power of wealth creation that modernity and capitalism brings, and basically the distribution of the wealth after that. Because there's just an ever increasing moral intuition, like in the United States, that it's just not okay to have subcultures of poor people who are just, or disparities, racial disparities in net worth. Those kinds of things become morally untenable and are, and increasingly so. And then just the general sort of a realization of the youth, and this is sort of the upside of green, the downside being sort of a hopeless depression, but also an understanding of, first of all, the whole psychological world. So, a lot of ways it's just that they're aware of more stuff of what it means to be human, but also just this, that it's not okay for there to be violence, oppression. I feel that myself, I look at Israel and Gaza and I think, oh, fuck, stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Just fucking stop it, and that's green. It's just like, it's almost a little magical. I mean, but I don't want to think about the geopolitical, fuck it, stop it. And there is something, when a critical mass of people have that, I think that's kind of a green thing. It's just a revulsion at all of it. That's good. That there will be, that'll somehow be reflected in the politics. And we're coming to that. We'll just be just not okay to allow or have this stuff happen, and we'll be better at figuring it out. And because it is, talk about a wicked problem, and a problem of development, where we have, a traditional culture versus a modern culture. And it's a modern culture with a uniquely large traditional and red, the sort of settler, God gave us this, it's as red as the, Muslim fundamental. It's fundamentalism on both sides. Now, higher percentage of it on the Muslim side than the Jewish side, but what a mess. But it's funny, messes. They get bad enough, people figure them out. And I don't know, especially, I don't know. This is where I'm kind of like, okay with, I used to feel like I had to know what was going to happen. But I guess you get your head beat up against that wall enough times, you realize you're not going to know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, it's interesting to see. And it's interesting to see how the youth are magnetized. And also, this is, woke green. And it's maybe, of course it has its fanatics and excesses, but just the natural identification with the oppressed over the so-called oppressor, that just in the power dynamics, naturally going for the less powerful. That feels like that's new in human history. And, it'll be more intelligently operationalized as humanity continues to evolve.
Okay.
Is my
Yeah.
prediction.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, it make a prediction.
Well, maybe
Yeah.
what you said can. Oh, go ahead, Lee. I think were you going to say
I was
something?
just wondering whether Jeff wanted to go into the teenage depression, or do we want to pivot away?
Well, the other, if I haven't said it already, I do think that there is as we continue to evolve, we're aware of dimensions of our own interior reality that we weren't aware of. We just get to be, that comes online in a way. So I think there's that to be said, and there's also something to be said for, of course, the standard explanation that social media and the influences of social media. And I think that's all completely legitimate. People are absorbed in finding people who think like them, and young people are, but young people are supposed to be dissatisfied. That's their job. They're supposed to sort of mystify and outrage their elders.
Yeah.
And they're doing that. So, from an evolutionary point of view, we can be a little more sort of friendly to the whole thing, and always sort of have this understanding that history is brought forward. History moves on the backs of fanatics, but there's great gifts and there's new things, and we have to differentiate between the two and, sort of work it out. And I think we are. This is what I was talking about earlier about Elon Musk and Twitter. Maybe the biggest surprise, or the biggest, Elon Musk should be the person of the year on Time Magazine. Let's just put it that way, because he has changed the Overton window. I often hear people talk about the Overton window as being the sort of what's socially acceptable to talk about, and that has broadened. And that's a good thing. It's part of how the differentiation between what's good about postmodernity and woke and multiculturalism, environmentalism, and all of the stuff that comes with that versus the fanatic ideas around it. And I think people are, we need an arena to do that. It's actually, and I think we'll get better at that kind of ideological play as we start seeing ideologies as objects and not just subjects. And we become sort of post-ideological in a certain kind of way where we're able to accommodate more than a couple, more than one. And there's a natural wisdom that arises out of that.
Very cool.
I think.
Well, we are running down our list of questions, and maybe we just have just a few more. So my next question is, it's about the Daily Evolver and Jeff Salzman in general. And I've known you for so long, and you've been doing the Daily Evolver for so long. And one of the common feedback that I hear over and over again about the Daily Evolver is that for some of us, it feels like a fresh breath of air because of some of the things that you already spoke about around Integral being an excellent map for us to use, and especially in the way that you use it and you present it in speaking about politics or culture or all the things that can easily bring us down. The integral lens can actually provide something far better than, what's the word you used, marinating, I think, in the negativity that is so around us often. So I often hear this about you and the Daily Evolver, about it actually providing a very optimistic view about the world, about the world at large. And the other feedback, much less so than that I have also heard is that Jeff Salzman and integral theory and the Daily Evolver can also be just too positive, too optimistic, when the world feels like it's burning. And sometimes there's a lot of turmoil. And so this feedback also led me to having an ILP session recently around this issue of optimism, or are we overly optimistic in the integral world? I'm curious how you feel about this little complaint that also comes targeted at the Daily Evolver and you. So from a more personal perspective, not so much as a general integral optimism, but I'm curious to hear from you, from your own personal view around this feedback. Does it make sense to you?
Thank you for that last part where because I could argue this and that, but for my own personal feel, I also in this moment want to double down on optimism. I mean, you know what I
I
mean?
told that to Lee. I told that to Lee earlier. I told Lee that if I ask
Did you
Jeff
really?
this question, then he might actually double down on the optimism. That it's like if everybody else wants to do the negativity thing, then they can. But I'm wondering how you might be able to
Yeah,
steal me in that. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think this is part of the sort of paradox of, you know, and I often use this example as, is it progress for a sweet, open-minded, bright-eyed 11-year-old to turn into a surly, depressed 13 or 14-year-old? Doesn't look like it, but it is, in the sense that they've grown. So growing is not pretty, but it's built into the cosmos. It's built into each of us, and it's built into the culture and the cosmos at large. So that's the part that's optimistic, is that we are growing, and I do think that there's an argument to be made philosophically that we're growing towards these gravitational values pools of goodness, truth, and beauty. That you have to say that the world is more beautiful. If you're not going to say that the world is more beautiful because human beings are in it, and that maybe the world would be more beautiful without human beings, then that's I'm not on that team. There is, life does want to become more complex, more expressive, more related, more intelligent, more loving. And that's the part where it starts not feeling so much about optimism as about faith. It's just faith in the system, knowing that there's going to be things that certainly aren't going to look like progress at the time, that are regressions indeed, that are eruptions of these earlier energetics that we haven't properly integrated, in our cultures and in our personal lives. And that any given time, there is the sort of just being the suffering of being, what Ken used to call it, the self-contraction of just being a human in a world where there's some part of you that longs to just dissolve into the all. And that, so I don't know, is that optimism?
Is that optimistic enough? Yeah.
Yeah, but I do want to, I don't want to just, that we're living in, our greatest good is to sit with the suffering of the ever darkening world. I don't want, the ever darkening world is not going to be my thing.
Yeah.
And that's why I always loved Trumpa and Naropa and the great Eastern sun, the sun that's rising,
Yes. And
So,
and it's so funny. He said about the great eastern sun, and he also said sitting in the fire.
oh, totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sitting in the
Yes,
fire.
yes,
Yeah. So
yes,
bold, right? Yeah, no,
yes.
just because it's, I think, worthwhile talking as integralists in general. Now I'm kind of generalizing a little bit, not so much just about you. Um, one of the things that I did end up doing, so I run this thing called the Polarity Lab on occasion, where we talk about polarizing topics that can be viewed as polarities, instead of polarizing, looking at it as polarities that are helpful and interdependent, often looking like they're tensions, but they're actually necessary for each other. So my take on this complaint that gets charged at Integral is probably that Integral really does offer a map that is very positive. It sort of gives a very rational, clear understanding sometimes about why things are the way they are, and that there's a rightful place for how things show up in the moment, or why the trajectory of something could be this, that it's actually heading towards greater emergence and lesser and lesser degrees of violence, or as more and more people step into postmodernity and above, perhaps there is some research to show that indeed that's going to happen, that there will be less and less violence, or whatever, all the bad things. But I think that the way that I would look at it as a polarity is that sometimes maybe we need to not so much look at this from a developmental view, while holding the developmental view as ever more positive or ever getting better. We could also look at sort of first tier and second tier as a polarity. So when we just focus and take the second tier view, which is what often integralists tend to do, is there's a lot of good in doing that we get to see more hope, and we get to see more the evolutionary trajectory and how things might get better, how there is more nuance, how there is more discernment. We can do all that with when we focus on second tier. But if we only focus on second tier and its capacities, then I think what we're failing to neglect is to see the ways in which first tier embraces struggle or is even focused on struggle. And by focusing on struggle, it's really, as we know the world thus far, it's first tier that has come up with most of the solutions also. It's science and technology, and but it, like, the beauty of amber blue traditional community and finding a sense of belonging for loneliness, or the value of community, the value of the magical enchanted purple way of giving the struggle a break is also a beauty that comes from first year. So when we focus on first year only to the neglect of second tier opportunity, then I think we get sucked into the negativity. But if we also focus only on the second tier optimism, then we can neglect to pay attention to the ways in which so much of the world is that first tier, and we do have to honor the turmoil that is within that as well. So I think that's what sometimes Integral forgets to do, and then it looks and feels a little bit like it's dismissive or negligent of the hurt and the pain and the real struggle. Yeah.
And Amali, you were saying something about your own temperament as a type 4 in relation to that you enjoy the tragedy. And so I think that's also perhaps interesting framing here, because it seems as if there are temperamental differences also.
Yeah, it's very much, I think, like a typology could explain some of this also. Integralists, there are a lot of Enneagram 5s, Enneagram 9s, especially in the integral space. And they're all, a little bit more positive thinking or more competency oriented. Whereas the feelers, like Enneagrams 2s, 3s, and 4s, especially 2s and 4s, and perhaps also to some degree type 6 and 8. This is, I'm speaking about the Enneagram, just in a very lighthearted way. We may be more attuned to emotional intensity. And that is the way in which some of us might navigate the world and be more attracted to where there is emotional intensity. And that's scary for some of the other types, like type 5s, for example, have a fear of that type of emotional intensity. And so a type 5 or a type 1 or type 9, or sometimes even a type 3 or a 7 might want to rather keep all that emotional intensity at bay. Let's put it under the rug for a little bit, and if you really want to deal with it, we'll bring it up. And I think for others of us, there's more juice in the emotional intensity, and without it, life can feel like a cardboard box, or it can feel empty of any richness that humanity deserves, that humanity is all about. Like that's where the poetry comes from. I mean, someone needs to be heartbroken to write the most incredible poem. Somebody needs to be, sitting in the fire, the other side of the great eastern sun, right? To be able to sit in the fire, that is also what awakens the pull and the tug of love as eros, pulling us up and wanting to offer ourselves to be pulled up in that way, and also to be touched and broken enough to want to come back down fully in that world of agape. to touch the leper, as Ken would say, to touch the wounds of the leper and not run away from that. That's the bodhisattva that is has made a promise, a deep vow to keep coming back, to keep coming back, to keep coming back, no matter what. So I think that Integral can do both and be vocal and active in both.
Yeah, beautiful, beautifully said. Yeah, and thank you for bringing that, for your Enneagram, bringing that piece to the party, and I recognize that in myself. It's a far flicker of a flame, but I do recognize it. I mean, it's wonderful to be with people and to know it who have genius and capacity that we don't. Isn't that great? I mean, it's one of the great things about the Enneagram is that we actually appreciate each other instead of like, what the fuck?
Yeah. And how wonderful that as integralists we get to appreciate things like the Enneagram instead of sort of bashing it, which happens a lot. So the way in which, here's what's most optimistic and beautiful about Integral is that everything is partially true. Everything is ultimately only partially true. So anyway, let's maybe just ask the last two questions and we can be quick and maybe move on. Yeah.
So Jeff, in 2023, what has stood out to you in art? So in books, in movies, in theater, in television, anything?
I mean, certainly as a cultural critic, and I don't mean that necessarily in always looking for the bad stuff, just, analyzing it, you can definitely see, again, the sort of mass movement to green, multicultural, most of the stories that are you see in the media, like Netflix shows and that sort of thing, they're going to have some story is going to have to be, or some part of the story is going to have to be about the oppressions and multiculturalism, and that is, I noticed that, and also just how interesting it is that every stage of development tells history through their lens. So, from a great perspective, and that's where a lot of, academics and, writers and that sort of thing, that's the lens they're going to have. We want more multiculturalism and more egalitarianism. And of course, a lot of times, the bad guy's going to have to be a white Christian. There's always that sort of a reverse hierarchy. There's that's still happening. But also seeing that makes me see this other strata of entertainment that is particularly, the entertainment I grew up with, where it was under this triumphalist progress of history and, that has sort of a naive modern faith in development, civilization and fighting savagery and all of that stuff. So that's interesting. And it's like Trump would talk about in the Mali, just how there's nothing solid to stand on, It's all a moving kind of a thing. So we're seeing that in culture. And yet we're seeing, like I just saw a movie that I would say one of the best movies I've seen all year, Godzilla -1, I think it's called. And it's a new Godzilla movie. And it's from a Japanese director. And it's Japanese. It's Japanese made for Japanese people. And Godzilla's their monster. Godzilla comes out of the nuclear thing, and it's a whole thing. But of course, Godzilla became Hollywood and, all the CGI. So this movie goes back to it uses some CGI, but it goes back to more old school kind of filmmaking. And it's interesting that one of the least interesting things about the movie is the monster. It's kind of a generic monster, and that's cool, and they do great things with it. And it's a monster movie. You have to have a monster it's fun, and it is. But what's far more interesting is sort of this old school heroics of this character who he was a kamikaze pilot, but he lost his nerve at the last minute, and so he landed on an island and sort of lost face. And so he's trying to get it back. And, it's a critique of the honor system in Japan. And it's a self-critique. Every movie sort of is for a culture, they're a way of shining the light in the mirror on a culture. and just all that comes, you just love this guy. It's so good at creating a character. And so, and it was not multicultural particularly. It was Japan. Japan's not a particularly multicultural country, so that was interesting. And there's just, it's like Jerry Brown, the governor of California, said, California has more than a share of everything. It's like the media, there's just more than a share of everything now. And that's one thing I notice. We're watching a show that's, again, it's almost as interesting to watch from this perspective of seeing the media of expressing a culture. It's South Korean. It's called Crashing Down on You. And it's this, I think 8 or 9 seasons, multi-episodic. And it's this girl boss, kind of rich girl with paparazzi in South Korea who paraglides into a storm and ends up in North Korea, where she's rescued by a North Korean soldier. So, that's the basic setup. And it's corny, and it, in a way that, from a sophisticated point of view, in a way, but it's Korean corny. And that's interesting, and it turns out that the stars became very popular. The show became very popular, and they married in real life. And so it has that sort of subtext to it. And it's just like, what fun to enjoy that, And then the one with called Fellow Travelers with Matt Bomer about the Red Scare and the homosexual purge from McCarthy in the 50s, and then goes into AIDS. And again, it tells the history of, sort of gay oppression, if you will. And it's very good. It's really well written. And it's not, it's not polemical in the sense that you feel like somebody's trying to send you a message. That's always an interesting thing, how to work with all that. But I did resist Namali's invitation to go see Taylor Swift, the actual person of the year, Time Magazine.
Yes.
Did you go see that, Namali?
If it's still
Oh,
playing,
really?
I'll still try to catch it. I do think I need to see someone who managed to create an earthquake. So I don't really even know a lot of her
I'll
music.
check in on it when it comes to the TV, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Namali recommended something to you, Jeff, and you recommended it to the viewers of the Daily Evolvers, and that was Un Village Français, the French village. So
Oh my God.
that was quite
The
wonderful.
best.
Yeah, and I really like the way
French Village, everybody, don't even hesitate. It's Namali and I both said this, and I think we meant it. It's the best TV show we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Or series. Yeah.
it's up there for me, certainly in my top 10. And the reason is because it is morally ambiguous in the sense that it puts us as the viewer in the situation of the Second World War in a divided France. So the Vichy regime, which was collaborating with the Nazis, and Free France, which had been invaded and was under Nazi control. And it just basically puts people in impossible situations all of the time, and then lets the viewer stew in it. And in the final season, indeed, we sort of get to look back on that period from a more modern perspective and see how easy it is to judge people who had to navigate those circumstances, and how impossible it is to understand history if you're coming from a position of moral superiority. So I thought it was very integral in the sense that it teaches about taking an ideological perspective on historical events.
Yeah, well, it's a great insight, Lee. I love that. And wasn't that an amazing last episode?
Yeah.
I mean, what an unexpected artistic leap that these people decided to make, and how successful it was. I mean, in ways that I never expected. I figured they'd end the show. We know how it ended. The war was over, and they figured it out. They muddled through. It's to the French telling their story of their French village and their way for their people. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very wonderful. I love movies, and I think that we typically wait for late fall and winter for the best movies because we're heading towards the Academy Awards. So I'm looking forward to Maestro. I'm wondering there's a lot of talk about it. I think for
Yep.
me, I wanted to like more than I did the Killers of the Flower Moon.
No spoilers, please. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, well, then I will just simply say I wanted to like it more than I did. It's still a good movie.
Mhm.
It's still a good
Is
movie.
it? Yeah.
It's good, yeah.
Martin
It's good.
Scorsese.
I'm not saying great, yeah.
Mhm.
And then I think we all, perhaps, well, at least you and I, Jeff, I think we went to see Oppenheimer together, and I think also we wanted to like it more than we actually did. And I
Yeah.
skipped the whole Barbie saga. I just couldn't get into it.
Oh,
Yeah, I think it's a cultural thing. When you grow up in Sri
uh,
Lanka, at the time that I grew up, and you have no idea who the hell Barbie is, so
really? Barbie had, because it's big all over the world. I mean, I
yeah.
guess not everywhere, but
No, yeah,
yeah,
not back in the day when I was a young girl growing up in Sri
yeah,
Lanka.
yeah,
Um, it wasn't a thing. It's
yeah,
probably more now. I think little girls growing up in Sri Lanka now probably have more Barbies. So, and the whole cultural
yeah,
piece it never really made it to. In
yeah. Well,
fact, I
certainly
told
a
Lee,
significant movie of 2023, and it'll be interesting to see how it's awarded by the Academy Awards. But
yeah. Oh, I'm sure they'll
it's a
win some
significant
awards.
cultural event.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I'll see if I ever get around to watching it. I think some people are quite upset that I haven't seen it yet. But yeah, I think my sweetest, like a really sweet movie that I watched this year and I really loved it was called The Miracle Club. And it's Maggie Smith and Kathy Bates. And they both act as Irish women in a little Irish community, and they go to France to Lourdes to see the miracle of Mother Mary's statue that's over there,
Yes.
and what happens around that, and how they each went for the traditional and sort of the pre-modern idea of a miracle. That's what they went there for, because they each had some kind of breast cancer or something, and they wanted a miracle to save them, but they walk away with a much more deeper interpretation, a more newer way of seeing what a real miracle actually is. Yeah,
Oh, that's fantastic. I
very sweet.
remember they
Yeah,
liked that movie, The
it's a very,
Miracle Club.
yeah.
I wrote it down. I'll add it to our list.
And I think another movie that I really loved was Past Lives, which was also a Korean couple, but living in Canada. The movie starts in Korea, then moves to Toronto, and then comes to the US. And that was a very
Uh-huh.
sweet movie as well. And I think it has received a few nominations in the Golden Globes or
How
something.
about you, Lee?
Yeah, so apart from the French Village, I must say I did enjoy Succession, even though it's extremely depressing in the way that it depicts basically a never-ending cycle of greed and trying to undermine each other within a particular family situation. But I thought it was well written in the sense, to me, it's a critique of the vacuousness of let's say nihilism and a materialist view of reality and trying to maximize profit at the expense of everything else in life, and the degree to which that also influences all of the relationships that we have in life. If we're looking to one up someone else, then of course we can't really be in a authentic relationship with people, because then we're continuously scheming how to get one over on the other person. And it was, for me, also just a critique of much of modern industrial societies where perhaps we don't have our eye on the most valuable things. And it was very well written, very humorous, and I thought it was ended well, which is for me something I don't see in many series and films. I don't see endings that are well written unless they're based on books, for instance, because it's typically very difficult to set up character developments and then to sort of arrive at a point where where there's a payoff for the people watching. But it was in Succession, and I think also because the character developments were circular, so nobody developed. Everyone was sort of stagnant in their own pond of despair, yeah, it was quite it was quite a watch. So yeah.
That's so interesting because that's why I tried several times. I tried, and I appreciated the writing. It's like you said. I mean, in terms of just an insult fest.
Yeah.
I mean, just the ways they humiliated each other over and over. They were good and entertaining, and nobody grew. Or you're saying that so as an artistic statement, it is indeed a critique of that energetic, if you will. Probably nobody is 100% that way, although some exceptions. But yeah, fine work of art, and I appreciate it. I appreciate that it is, and maybe not my thing at the moment, at least. Yeah,
Right.
I love Kieran Culkin. I say, just his.
Oh yes, he is very well suited for the role, also. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great when you see that sort of transmission, so effectively.
Well, maybe this is a good place for us to close. What a year it has been, 2023.
Yeah.
Any last minute, anything you want to share, Jeff, before we close?
No, but just how fun it was to talk with you about it, to just pause and take a look. That's one of the things we want to remind ourselves to do. And the end of the year always is sort of like, yeah, you got to, what would we do and what's next?
Yeah.
Oh, what's next? There's a topic for you. I mean, the next year.
I was going to go deeper into the 2024 elections because I feel like Americans especially will have to brace ourselves and have the seatbelt on all the time. But I decided, you know what? I think we're going to get enough of it next year, and it's going to be scary.
Yeah, let's not borrow it from the future.
Let's not marinate. Let's not start frying in it already. Yeah. We'll come back to you. We'll come for a little optimism check-in. For a sanity check-in next year, we'll come back to you, Jeff. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for hanging out with us and for sharing with us what this year has been like for you, and a little bit of also what you're looking forward to next year around it continuing to evolve and grow. And yeah, so thank you, Lee.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Namali. It's wonderful to speak with you again.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lee. Thank you, Namali, and thank you, everybody. We'll keep it going and check in later.
All right. Bye-bye now.